Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. We're going to wait for everybody to kind of file in and get situated and get ready for the show. So, I am Mother Della Mort, and this is my horror gallery. And tonight we are going to continue with our London's Magnificent Seven, which is referring to the cemeteries there in London. They have a lot of history, but what we wanted to do is kind of go over some of the prehistory, how they came about, and kind of why they're there, and how the Victorian kind of park or garden cemetery kind of came to be. So it's interesting stuff. If you missed part one, definitely go back. We have it here on Facebook as well as our YouTube. And please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And you can get caught up on that. So if you are new here, definitely let us know you are here and where you're from, because we do love new victims here in the crypt. I am going to go ahead and go over a little bit of housekeeping. I've got some exciting news as always. We are always super busy, just like I guess Santa's workshop. Our little bunny clutch is always in the background, busy, busy, busy. So the exciting news I know some of you guys have heard is for our second annual Krampusnacht, or Krampusnacht, however you want to say it, stream, our live stream event. This is our second year officially doing this to kind of end out our fall season, and everybody getting ready for the holiday season, Yule and Christmas and all that stuff. But this year on December 15th, we are very, very honored to be welcoming a nonprofit group by the name of the Ohio Krampus Society. Very, very cool. Not only will a spokesman for Krampus be here, but Krampus himself will be here as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to be going over kind of the pre-Christian as well as the history once kind of Christianity got a hold of the Krampus tradition, kind of where that went and how we view it today. I think it's just kind of starting to build up steam here in the U.S. It's kind of interesting when it comes to European folklore, how some of the I guess with Mother Goose too, and Grimm's fairy tales, they're just kind of been watered down for the colonies' consumption, so to speak. But on December 15th at 10 p.m., we will start off our Krampusnacht stream event with the Ohio Krampus Society. Now, the Ohio Krampus Society's mission is to keep the traditions of Krampus, both, like I said, pre and post Christianity, alive while educating others and giving back to the community through their nonprofit charitable work. So we will have a link in the feed that night. All proceeds, if you feel compelled to donate, is going to WAGs for Kids. That's wagsforkids.org, which helps provide service dogs for children with disabilities. So that'll be really good, and it's going to be a fun night. And then, of course, after Krampus has to head back to wherever he goes, we will continue the stream with our traditional ghost stories for Christmas. So going to be a lot of us here, including, Roots Lead Red, Mother Della Mort. We may even have a visit from Odd Daughter, as well as the Owl Light Society will be here, and we'll be sharing spooky ghost stories for Christmas. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right, what else do we have to go over? So the newsletter. So in the newsletter department, yes, it has been crickets for some time, but like I said, we have been very, very busy. We've made a lot of changes, and for ever onward and ever upward with the new company and all that kind of stuff. It's kept us super, super busy. So what we've decided to do is we're going to do a quarterly newsletter, and it's going to be in more of a form of like an e-zine. So if you have not joined or signed up for that, it's super easy. Just go to psychobunnydc.com. you have this nifty little thing that'll pop up on your screen asking if you want to join our newsletter, and all you have to do is put your email in. So that's going to be going out on the 5th of December. So hurry over there and go ahead and sign up for that if you have not already. And it's going to be kind of like a community paper, a community. I go back and I think of the times back, and of course, I am 148 years old. But during kind of the old school punk rock phase, it was very common to have very localized little e-zines that would be passed around within the punk rock community that had just all kinds of different little information and things like that in there. And that's kind of our concept for this. There's going to be Ask Raz, so that's a lot of fun, kind of like Dear Abby. So they'll have that in there, and some puzzles and things like that for you to fill out. We're also going to have a community section. This community section is free, and it's basically, our idea was for the PBDC community by the PBDC community. So if you've got like life, milestone announcements you want to make, or birthday announcements, or anything along those lines, we're going to have a community corner in there, and we'll put those in there for our community. So there'll be a way to contact us for that as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I believe. Oh, and the members only area. Some of you may not know what I'm talking about, so you'll just have to stay tuned. You'll have to subscribe to our newsletter to find out. But back by popular demand, our members only area will be returning early 2023. We're revamping it, and this is just kind of a little safe, I don't want to say safe space, but a little special spot where our hardcore supporters and things like that could go, kind of like a little thank you, little special area on the website that you'll have to have the password for. So yeah, that'll be coming back in early of 2023. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we're going to get started on our part 2. Like I said, we are actually, the overall topic that we were talking about is London's Magnificent Seven, which are the 7 Victorian cemeteries that at one time surrounded London, but now have pretty much been absorbed. But we're on part 2, and this edition is Dancing on the Dead. And yes, literally dancing on the dead. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we'll get started. All right, gosh, a lot of people in here. Hello, Calvin. Hey, Delphine. And then Shelby. Hi, Shelby. Thank you. Shelby says, hey, beautiful. And then we have Razzle Dazzle in the house. Good to have you here. And of course, Calvin. Hello, Calvin. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. And look, guys, the easiest way to support your streamers and to support people that you enjoy watching and it's free, it's just to share out to people you think that might like our content. So share. All right. So let's get started. Now, and I'm just going to quote, when in the instance of the death of a child, I ask why it cannot be interned earlier. The usual reply is, we cannot raise the money earlier. So we did go over this in part 1, kind of, people were just pretty much living in corpse soup. They were just living in corpse soup. That's just the easiest way to kind of explain it. Sanitary conditions were awful. Burial conditions were awful. Unless you were of the very well-to-do, not only did you not have you were not given a whole lot of dignity and respect in life, and you definitely were not given any type of respect or dignity in death. The cemeteries were just grossly overcrowded, and the cost to bury your loved one was, for someone that could barely make it as it was, sometimes they had to basically hang on to their deceased loved ones for up to 2 weeks often. Often the housing was so small that, the dead would basically be given the only bed in the home. And we did We did kind of touch on body bugs, that it was not unusual to have body bugs crawling around. So, what we're going to talk about tonight is a place called Enon Chapel. Now, Enon Chapel in the 19th century London was also known for its dancing on the dead, and it was literally what the revelers did. But a little bit of history about Enon Chapel before they were tap dancing on the dead, basically. Now, Enon Chapel was opened around 1822 on Clement's Lane near the Strand in London. And remember, the Strand is where they dumped everything, and they also had a lot of their potable water that they used came from the Strand. Yeah, so like many buildings, it was situated above an open sewer. Just about all sewers were open. If it wasn't running down the sides of the streets, it was going through open sewers. Now, the local Baptist minister, a Mr. W. Howes, was a very greedy and dishonest man. The people who lived in his parish, unfortunately, were usually very, very poor. Now, people would go to the upper floor of the chapel for the services and meetings, and below them, in the basement, the dead were buried. The only thing separating the living from the dead was a thin wooden floor. Now, the floorboards would constantly shrink and contract due to the weather and the temperature. And this would cause gaps to appear between basically the flooring, the wood slats, which of course would just unleash an ungodly smell of decomposition that would escape through these gaps. Now, at the time, like I said, it was common to bury people inside London churches. We talked about the vaults. This wasn't necessarily a vault, though. He figured out a way to make a little bit of money because he offered the burial services for so cheap. So it wasn't necessarily a vault like we talked about. And in this case, unfortunately, we didn't have to worry about the exploding coffins either, because he would do something with those as well. Now, like I said, at the time, it was common to bury people inside London churches or under them, so to speak. But Mr. Howes offered his services for only 15 shillings, which is much less than other parishes would charge. They normally charged around £117. And though he had a few morals or sense of decency, he didn't really have a whole lot towards the deceased. His overcrowded basement became filled with the coffins up to the very rafters, so that there was only the wooden flooring between the living and basically the festering dead. Now, despite the fact that parishioners were already inhaling the noxious fumes of the putrefied corpses below, the enterprising Mr. Howes realized he could continue to immune these dead provided he take a few shortcuts. Coffins lovingly brought for the deceased by parish family members were chopped up and used by Howes as firewood in order for him to be able to pack the cadavers more tightly between the 50 by 40 square foot pit. Now, the bodies were covered by no more than just a few inches of earth, if any at all. And hence the stench was it was unbearable. I've heard references to the fact that when the doors to that area were opened up, it would literally extinguish candles. Now, he realized he could also discard remains down the sewer and let them float through the sewer tunnels, basically like garbage, ricocheting off the stone walls and becoming covered in just basically London's grossness and feces. And of course, these would eventually dump out into the Strand. Now, eventually, this chapel and the area surrounding it became known as a modern Golthalia due to the unsavory characteristics noted by tenants and visitors. The chapel often smelled horrible, and in the summer, it was even worse. The Sunday school was full of local children who had to sit there for up to 6 hours. They were constantly being pestered by insects. It could be anything from long, thin black flies that came out of the coffins, or, like we had referred to before, the more common bugs that the parishioners called body bugs. Now, residents living around the chapel were frequently annoyed by the disgusting smell. Vast number, of course, of rats. It would draw the rats in. of rat infestations in the houses nearby. And like we had touched on last time, because there was so much bacteria just in the air from all the decomposition and putrefaction, even meat, like at the local butchers and things like that, the rennet for cheese would go bad and putrefied within just a few hours because of so much bacteria. Now, it became dangerous to sit in the church, for fainting spells and sicknesses occurred every day, and many people returned home with headaches. A Mr. Tumbleton, who was an undertaker who had attended a funeral at Enon Chapel, perceived a revolting stench during the service, and within 40 hours, he himself was seized with a malignant typhus, which confined him to his bed for 9 weeks. It wasn't until 1834, though, that concerns were raised and caused the commissioners of the sewers to investigate further. They decreed that the sewer below the chapel should be vaulted over after they discovered human remains festering down there. However, the corpses at this point were disturbed and mutilated, but unbelievably not removed. So basically, there were so many corpses that he basically had no room for. He would put them down in the sewer, and it just got so bad that they had to basically bring the sewer commission in to check it out. And that's when they realized all those bodies were down there. But rather than remove them, they just vaulted over the sewer and just left them down there to just keep festering. Now, the ever enterprising Mr. Howes continued with this particular type of interning the dead or the local dead in other ways. By now, about 500 corpses a year he was taking in. Now, over a period of time, he was said to have moved 60 cartloads of dirt and human remains to both the Waterloo Bridge and then also to throw them into the River Thames. So he what he couldn't fit down in the sewer, especially once it had been capped, and what he had ran out of room, even with like the quicklime and stuff like that that they would use to help the decomposition move faster. He would basically just have to take cartloads of the dead out and just dump them, over the Waterloo Bridge and into the Thames, and it's just basically corpse use all over again, just corpses everywhere. Now, he did become careless and wound up dropping some of his cargo on one journey, and a passerby bent down and picked out of it a human skull. Now, his practice continued until the minister actually died in 1842, at which point the human bones were even discovered beneath his kitchen floor. The new tenants who took over the lease in 1844 knew of the chapel's history and capitalized on it by appealing to the Londoners' obvious tolerance for the macabre. They placed a layer of brick over the original wooden floor, laid down new wooden floorboards, and opened the space into what is called a low dancing salon or saloon, cheerfully advertising dances on the dead as well as gambling could be found inside. These dances continued until around 1848, when the philanthropist and sanitary reformer and surgeon, a Mr. George Alfred Walker of Drury Lane, bought the chapel, which was in the immediate neighborhood of his surgery. And I'm going to go into that here in just a moment. But yeah, even once this other company had purchased Enon Chapel and had opened it up as a dancing salon, they had a device that they had ran down into the sewers to where you could actually, if you wanted, I think you had to pay, but if you paid the little penny price or whatever, you could still view the corpses down there festering. So they really turned it into kind of an advertising gimmick to get people into that dance salon and gambling establishment. So yeah, but let me see what's going on in the comments, and then we will continue because I see a whole bunch of them. Oh my goodness, bunches of people in here. All right, let's see. Who all do we have? Oh my goodness, everybody. Let me get back to where I was. Hang on, guys. Also, Shelby says, I have missed you, Odd Mother. Well, I am back. We've just, like I said, we've been super busy and I'm finally free. They finally let me out of the crypt so that I can start streaming again. And I'm so happy. And so we have Nicole. Hello, Nicole. How are you? We are glad to have you here in the crypt. Like I said, we always love new victims here in the crypt. And then we have Sherry, the birthday clown. Hello, Sherry. And we have the PBDC collective in the house. Yay. And it says to remember to follow, like, and share. Smash that notification bell. Yes, 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 yes. Matter of fact, don't smash it, stab it. Stab that notification bell. And then we have Roots Bleed Red. And we have the PBDC collective. And Psychomantium. Oh my goodness, Channel Nine's in here. And then Spook, hello, Spook. How are you? And yes, he says, Odd Mother actually catching you live. Yay. I know it's been a minute. I am so glad you were able to join us. And then we have Hexus in the house, our resident and most loved demon is in the house. And let's see what else we got. And I hope I'm not putting my finger in your face. I'm really good about doing that. And we have Akia in the house. Hello. She says hello. So we're glad to have her here. And did I get everybody? I think I got everybody. Let's see. Oh my goodness. All right, yeah. So let's get on with it, and then we will go to a commercial here shortly. All right, so we were talking about the surgeon and how he wound up actually buying the property. His name was Mr. George Alfred Walker of Drury Lane. Now, one of the things that a lot of these surgeries or medical, schools and things like that, of course, were very well known for having interaction with grave robbers, if not in some cases, requiring that their students provide their own corpse, which would send a lot of these medical students down a life of crime as far as body snatching and things like that. And it was also a way for a lot of these preachers and pastors and different churches and parishes and things like that to make a little bit of extra money by opening their hand and turning their head and I didn't see anything because they if their parish was mostly of like the working class or the very poor. They really didn't get tithes and things like that. Not like some of the more well-to-do areas of London. So they were not below knowing that some corpses were being taken, which also solved the problem of the cemetery overcrowding because they really just didn't have any option other to chop up the bodies that were there in order to bury another one on top of them. So it got really gross. But a lot of the, because again, some people had an idea of like actual bacteria and germs and things like that that could be, present in humans and animals and on surfaces and things like that. But for the most part, you'll see a lot of reference when you read a lot of history period things in these times around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, to where they referred to things as miasma, which was they believed that a lot of the germs that everything was airborne. And if there was a bad smell, then of course it must be some sort of disease or something like that. So they thought everything was just kind of airborne, but a lot of the students were coming down with diseases, and things like that because if they had an open sore or if someone's corpse was contagious with smallpox or what have you, cholera. Cholera was a really bad thing in these areas because of the pollution of the drinking water in the wells. A lot of the medical students would wind up coming down sick as well. So it was in his best interest to buy Enon Chapel and basically get these corpses corded off or toted off as much as he could. Now, in 1839, he'd written, and I do quote, "My reflections upon leaving the masses of corruption here exposed were painful in the extreme. I want language to express the intense feeling of pity, contempt, and adherence I experienced. Can it be, I thought I, that in the 19th century, in the very center of the most magnificent city in the universe, such sad memories of ignorance, culpability, and degrading morality still exist?" And again, at his own expense, which came to around £100, um, he began to have the bodies exhumed and buried properly in a single pit in Norwood Cemetery. And we're going to actually talk about some of these cemeteries in part 3. We're going to go really in depth in them, because if anybody's going to travel to Europe, if that's on your bucket list, and you find yourself in London, these definitely, if you are into like architecture and history and things like that, these cemeteries are something you really want to check out. And each one of them is unique. Now, Mr. Walker, who had studied at the St. Bartholomew's Hospital, was passionate about the terrible situation that disposing of the dead and keeping them among the living was having on people's health. The process of exhumation at Enon became a spectacle when the remains were piled up into a pyramid of human bones as they were exposed to view near the premises visited by over 6,000 people. It was at this time, with the human remains finally being removed, that it was calculated that over 12,000 bodies had been given eternal rest by Mr. Howes, which was the one that originally ran Enon Chapel. So there was over 12,000 bodies that either were still vaulted up down in the sewers or just couldn't be found. So yeah, it's pretty gross. Now, Enon Chapel, however, wasn't the only place in London where this practice occurred, although due to the greed of its minister, it was, in fact, the worst. So before we move on to burial clubs, which is kind of like a burial insurance, because it presents its own set of problems, we're going to go to a short commercial break. So I will see you back in just a moment.
It's a man, Eres Carnegie, Stegan, Australia,
Hello, all you beautiful people out there. It's your boy Sloopy. And when I'm not guzzling down gallons and gallons of amazing ice cream, yes, oh, I love ice cream. Oh, hang on. I'm watching PBDC TV. Now, back to the show, all you beautiful people. And remember, stay nasty.
And we're back. All right, so let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we're going to get to burial clubs. Because, like I said, but sadly, they had their own problem or presented their own unique set of problems with these burial clubs. So you can only imagine. So let's see what's going on in the comments because we have a whole slew of them again. I'm so glad everybody is in here. Lots of fun. All right, so let's see, where are we at? Let me get back to where I was. Wow, you guys are chatty tonight. This is great. So apparently Akia is a Wendigo giraffe tonight. I say, you know what? If you can dream it, be it. If you can dream it, be it. And then Sherry the birthday clown says, I love seeing the cemeteries in Scotland when I visited with my family. I see my family's broken castle and got to stay with my aunt's mom. She stayed and I'm assuming stayed with her and her brother, with my uncle and her kids. So that sounds amazing, Sherry. I would love to go to Scotland. It is on my list as well. I think I just really need to win the lottery or find that big bag of money that I've been looking for all my life, and just take like a month and a half and just, just tour all the places I want to go. So that sounds absolutely amazing. No, not burial plugs, burial clubs. Clubs. Like I am going to join this, like, what is it? The He-Man Woman Haters Club, like off the Little Rascals. Club, not plugs. Burial plug. Hi, Melissa. How are you? So glad to have you here, joining us tonight. Hi, Tia. How are you? Matt. Oh, Beans. Beans is in the house. Hey, Beans. How you doing? I am so glad you're here. And Sven. Hey, Sven. How are you? And Jenny. Hello, Jenny. All right. So let's get back to burial clubs, not burial plugs. So mortality was so high that burial clubs were instituted. Now, these clubs were basically equivalent to insurance for funerals, to help pay for some of the costs if one of your loved ones were to pass on, which was, being that in some areas the normal life expectancy was about 18 or 19 years old. That probably happened a lot. That happened a lot. Now, like modern insurance companies, burial clubs also had to deal with insurance fraud. Eventually, it came to be discovered that some children, because it was mostly children and probably the elderly, that were enrolled not only in one club, but in several clubs. Because, back then they didn't have a way to keep track of that, who was registered with who and all that kind of stuff. Now, the death rates of these children were often 4 times higher than the rates of those not enrolled in burial clubs, um, basically 68% compared to 36%, respectively. Now, many parents would also enroll their sick child with multiple burial clubs, knowing that the child would not survive for very long. And on the death of the child, collected the burial expenses from each of the clubs. One man was said to have put his child in 19 clubs. Unfortunately, many people were also accused of murdering their children in order to collect these burial fees. Because children, it's just so sad and kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. But We have a certain view of, we hold our children very close and are very protective over them. And that wasn't through history. That's not always been the case. Same with kind of geographical within the world. That's not always the case. But so it's kind of hard for me to understand that. But it happened a lot. It happened a lot. Kind of like with, oh, what was her name? I know a few of you know it. Nanny somebody. She was the baby minder, basically where unwed mothers would drop off their children, and she wound up killing a whole bunch of them. I can't think of her name. Um, all right, so, but to quote Chadwick, because like I said, I'm using a lot of his first person experiences for this particular subject that we're doing. Now, he did write, none of her children who had died were more than 18 months old. A surgeon stated, and this was of a woman that was being accused of murdering a child. The surgeon stated that he made a post-mortem examination of the body of the deceased. It was then in an advanced state of decomposition, but not so far gone as to infer with the examination, or interfere with the examination, I'm sorry. There was no appearance of external violence to the body, but there was an extreme degree of emaciation. So very, very tiny, very, very small and thin. The brain was healthy and gave no indication of convulsions having been the cause of death. The process of teething had not commenced, so that wasn't a problem. And had such been the case, it might have led to the basically the assumption that maybe it was because the baby didn't eat correctly or something like that. The lungs, heart, stomach, and intestines were in natural and healthy state. The jury having expressed it as their opinion that the evidence of the parent was made for the occasion and entitled to no credit, returned the following verdict: died through want of nourishment, but whether occasioned by a deficit of food or by disease of the liver and spine, brought on by improper food and drink, or otherwise, does not appear. So they were actually to go on and take further steps as far as the man being able to enforce payments upon his insurance companies or burial clubs for the 10 burial clubs for the burial of that one child. So basically, as far as the surgeon was concerned, the child had been starved to death. But, of course, in that time, they didn't really have the means to say 100% because, in the case of the verdict, it was more like, well, it could have been, some problem within the body. Now, there were two similar cases that came under the notice of the clerk and superintendent register of the Stockport Union. In both of these cases, he prosecuted the parties for murder. In one case, where 3 children had been poisoned with arsenic, and I quote by Chadwick, the father was tried and the mother and convicted at Chester and sentenced to be transported for life, but the mother was eventually acquitted. In the other case, where the judge summoned up for a conviction, the accused, the father, was, to the astonishment of everyone, acquitted. In this case, the body of a child was exhumed after internment, and arsenic was detected in the child's stomach. In consequence of the suspicion raised upon the death on which the accusation was made in the first case, the bodies of the mother's other 2 children were taken up and examined, when arsenic was found also present in their stomach. In all these cases, payments on the deaths of the children were insured again by burial clubs. Now, some of these clubs contained as many as 5,000 people, but without any supervision from locals or the government, many collapsed as a result of financial mismanagement, theft, and or fraud. Now, Chadwick continued to be an advocate for the sanitation in the towns and the cities and urged local government to get involved in the health improvement. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 came as a direct response to the publication of, and this is what Chadwick wrote, and you can get it, it's out of copyright, and it's really long, The Sanitary Conditions of the Laboring Population. That is the name of the book. And if you like this kind of history, it's a really interesting read. It's not very, very long, but it's got a lot of cases from just bad living, sickness, and they were all cramped in living quarters so small. Just a lot of different stories on the burial clubs and people basically murdering their children. Unfortunately, it was the children that tended to be victims of this more times than not. So now it would be, like I said earlier, the Enon Chapel affair, which brought attention to the disgraceful state of many of the city's burial grounds. Now, with a parliamentary select committee that was eventually established to deal with the issue, for a few years, however, little did happen. So it was really weird. So, like, and you see it a lot of time, and I call it propaganda. So in order to do a lot of these upgrades to like the sewers and different things like that, and clean up these cemeteries, because the cemeteries were just, I mean, they were just corpse juice. That's all I can say. I mean, you couldn't even go visit your loved ones, because first of all, if they're not stolen by the grave robbers, um, they're either rising up out of the ground, because the ground is so just saturated with corpses, rotting, putrefied corpses. And there were at least the minimum was at least like 10 coffins per grave. Like that was normal. And but they would just pack them in there just as much as they could. And eventually, with all the rains and things like that, erosion happens. And the only way to really cure that would be just to basically chop them up, and either tote the bones off and dump them somewhere else, or just put them in these vaults and stuff. So it was really, really gross. But a, that was going to take a lot of money, which meant that the taxes were going to go up, which meant for the most part, it was going to be the better off, well-to-do people that would have to pay the higher taxes. Um, and so they basically started a campaign within Parliament of just how awful this was. That they were asking, that there were certain groups that were asking for conditions to be cleaned up. And really, the only way, which is so disappointing, the only way that they were able to really, really convince a lot of these like higher up nobilities and things like that, people within Parliament and things like that, and business owners and things like that, was to say, look, we've got people here in this particular area, and we have shown you in this report that was ordered by the government that most people are not living past 19 years old. If you clean this up, people are going to live to like 30, 40 years old. Think of all the years worth of work you're going to get out of this worker if you clean things up. And they were like, hmm. So, that was really a lot of the big push for that. Um, as well as there was a huge cholera outbreak in 1848, which did wind up leading to the government changing their mind. It was super bad, like really, really bad. Um, so they were kind of forced, their hand was forced to really clean up London and clean up the living conditions of the poor and working class. Um, Now, soon the government did go into action, cleaning up the streets and improving beyond recognition the sewage systems, drains, and water courses in all the major towns and cities. Now, life expectancy did actually improve. It improved, and general health improved. Death from the waterborne diseases decreased exponentially, and Chadwick's suggestions prove improvements were carried out. So what he was saying was truth. I mean, even though their idea of where a lot of these diseases came from, they weren't necessarily airborne. Um, they were just people were living in it. It really did help cleaning up and making things more sanitary. Really did help the longevity and lifespan of the common person. Now, eventually the New Burial Act of 1852 did wind up closing down burial grounds within the metropolitan London area, and allowed larger cemeteries on the outskirts at that time to be established. And in 1832, Parliament passed an act encouraging the establishment of private cemeteries outside central London. Over the next decade, 7 cemeteries, which are London's Magnificent Seven, were established, and at least 4 of which were consecrated by Charles James Bloomfield, which was the Bishop of London. And these that we're going to go over next week in depth, and some of them you may not have heard of before. There's one on here that I was not aware of. Is Kensal Green Cemetery, West Norwood Cemetery, Nunhead Cemetery, which that's the one I didn't really know about. Abney Park Cemetery, Brompton Cemetery, which has got a lot of really cool stories. We've done a stream, a subject on Brompton Cemetery before, as well as the Victorian Valhalla Highgate Cemetery. And it has a lot of history and possibly a vampire too. And we'll get into that next week or next feed, which will be week after next. And then Tower Hamlets Cemetery. I'd never heard of that one either. And as well, we are going to talk about one other thing that kind of became all the rage. Because if you're putting these cemeteries on the outskirts of the metropolis or London proper, you've got to have a way to get things from point A to point B. And so there was a few enterprising businesses out there that came up with and I think there were 2, but the most well known was the London Necropolis Railway. And so we're going to talk about that next week. I think that would be cool if they still had some of this stuff. I really, really do. But yeah, that's actually we're ending. Well, I'm not ending yet, but we're done a couple minutes early tonight. But let's see what's going on in the comments. And yeah, so let's see what's going on. Hi, Pogo. I see Pogo is here with us tonight. Yay. All right, let's get back to where I was. Let's see. So Sherry the Birthday Clown says they have a YouTube movie about the baby farm. Yeah, that was as Ma Guinness. Was it Ma Guinness? Was that her name? Or is that the one over here in the United States? But yeah, that baby minders were very, very popular, or very common, I should say, because they not only like collected from these unwed mothers and things like that. Um, I would imagine it would not be uncommon for them to have some sort of membership within these burial clubs as well. So they made money off the deaths of these children, because you can keep taking them in if you don't have mouths to feed. So just a very, very sad time in our in basically humanity's history. But yeah, kind of the same ideas, and you still unfortunately have people that try to commit insurance fraud and things like that. Like for life insurance and stuff. But it was a real problem back then because they just couldn't keep track of everybody. Let's see. And so Sherry, the birthday clown, you got a lot of really good information tonight, Sherry. Says that's why they say a lot of the places in England are quite haunted for those reasons alone. They didn't get a proper burial, and they didn't have a chance to pass on the other side onto the other side. Well, and it makes a lot of sense, and like I've got friends that live over there, and there are some areas, because a lot of these old cemeteries and things were turned into what they refer to as public space. So basically, parks is what they were turned into. But there are some areas within London that you'll walk, and like the actual sidewalk, they've just taken the headstones and laid them down as part of like the cobblestone. So, because London has just grown so large within its lifespan, that they've just built over. Like there's a lot of rivers a lot of people don't realize that exist within London proper, that they've just basically built over. Um, there's a lot of plague pits that they're constantly running into that they had no idea that were there, because a lot of times churches and things like that would keep some sort of track on where some of these bodies were buried, but at its height with the bubonic or the great pestilence, um, people were just they were running for their lives. They were trying to get out of populated areas and things like that. And um, a lot of the ministers and things like that were dying, the ones that would actually try to go out and help their parish during the great pestilence. So a lot of people got buried. They didn't know where they got buried. So it's not uncommon for them to be redoing an area, building a new building, and run into these plague pits. So but yeah, basically London is just like a necropolis, really, if you think about it. It's just on a mountain of the dead. And so Akia says, a show I was watching yesterday said in some countries they value the lives of children over adults, but in others they value the lives of adults over children. Yeah, you still see that. And when an adult dies, you lose knowledge and experience. When a child dies, you lose hope. Oh, that's poignant. I like that. I like that a lot. And then Tia says that's messed up. Yeah, that it is. It really is. And Akia says, I thought it was an interesting take on death values. Yeah, it really, it really was. I mean, even today, like you said, just depends on the area, the region within, our world as we know it, kind of how, children are looked upon. Same with the elderly, in some, places, the elderly are seen as someone that should be revered and taken care of, and others not so much. They're seen as kind of a draw on you know things. So on society, I guess, as a whole. Hi, Richard. How are you? It's good to have you here. And then Sherry says, Kensal Green. I've heard of that one. Yeah, a lot of those I had heard of before, some more than others, but Nunhead and Tower Hamlet Cemetery, I had not really heard anything about. And like I said, I'm going to have pictures. We'll do like a whole little presentation next show, and talk about kind of the some of the architecture that is well known for each one, some of the well known people that are buried there. At its time, who were allowed to be buried in some of these cemeteries. So we'll go over all that, and take a look at what they look like today. So they're all very unique in their own way. All right, let's see. Hi, Kyle. How are you? Let's see. Oh, there's just so much here, guys. Okay, and then Delphine shared, which I think is this is very cool. Our family blessing on a birth is, may you die before your children. A parent shouldn't have to suffer through the death of a child. It is the sentiment behind it. I absolutely love that, Delphine, um, and very true. They're just being in a family that had to face that before. um, it's not easy. Oh my goodness, it is so not easy. So yeah, I like that. I like that family blessing. I really, really do. So I'm good, Kyle. I'm good. Hope you're doing well as well. All right, guys. Well, Actually, look, we got 4 minutes. How about that? I actually stayed on time. Stay tuned because we have Roots Bleed Red coming on later. There's going to be about a 30-minute gap. Hold on. Let me check something real quick. Yeah. Okay. So stay tuned. There's going to be about a 30-minute gap so that Facebook and YouTube can reset itself. So that you get the notifications. But Roots Bleed Red will be on here very, very shortly. So I've done very well about not going over my time. So, so don't forget the newsletter. Go sign up for the newsletter before Monday if you want to receive those. And it's going to be a quarterly, which is going to be so much easier to manage. Unless, of course, we've got anybody out there that loves to write and wants a little side hustle and wants to start handling our newsletters for us. You can definitely get in touch with us on that one. But right now we wear so many hats here at PDBDC. So yeah, we do a lot of different things. So we've turned that into a quarterly Zine rather than monthly. It was just way too much to keep up with. So that'll be coming out on the 5th. Again, don't miss the Krampusnacht event on the 15th. Again, it will be the Ohio Krampus Society, which is a nonprofit organization. We are just so excited to have them here. It's going to be super interesting, and Krampus will be here along with his presenter, so to speak for him, because it's when you're Krampus, it's hard to speak. So that, and then we'll let Facebook and YouTube reset itself a little bit, and then we'll continue on that evening with our Christmas time ghost story. So that's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss that. Let's see. We have from what I understand, a new Google Radio coming out this Sunday. And then Steve the Cat will be back Monday. And then we have Out of the Ordinary. And I do believe, I think, the one Monday may be wrapping up his season. I'm not sure for Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. And then we have Out of the Ordinary with Mikey. So that'll be on Tuesday. That'll be a lot of fun. And then, of course, Chit Chat with a Ka. So if it's who I think it's going to be, oh, you guys are going to love it. It's hard to keep track. She's had so many amazing guests on that show. And that show has just skyrocketed. Like she had started that just to kind of, have something to do, something for you guys to tune into. And it's just exploded and it really taken on a life of its own. And I'm just so happy for her. She's having so much fun with that. So, and then I'll be back Friday after next, because we do have You Can't Sit With Us podcast that's coming up Thursday. So yeah. So, and then I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, the 15th kind of wraps up the season for us until the beginning of the year of 2023. So, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right, guys. Well, pleasant nightmares. It was so glad having everybody here, and I will see you back here Friday after next. And we'll be talking actually about the actual London's Magnificent Seven. So pleasant nightmares, everybody. Bye.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. There is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Bunny DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Your head and free your mind.